The Captive Curse is a game about people who hurt women. It's a game about how entire communities can become desensitized to violence against women. It's a game about bravely staring the monsters in the face. Because the real monsters, the ones that are actually scary, they're never fairy tale creatures. They're people, just like us. In more concrete terms, The Captive Curse is a 2011 point-and-click adventure game developed by Her Interactive. It is the 24th game in Her Interactive's Nancy Drew series, which features the iconic girl detective solving mysteries in modern settings. This game follows Nancy as she travels to a Bavarian castle in Germany, where an eccentric millionaire has hired her to uncover the truth behind rumored monster sightings on the castle grounds. The Captive Curse is a direct sequel to Shadow at the Water's Edge, one of the most beloved games in the series, which I already have a video on if you're interested. It's so interesting to me that Her Interactive produced these games back to back because they sort of have similar vibes and they deal with very similar themes. Both games take Nancy to a setting outside the United States. Both have strong Gothic elements, with The Captive Curse going for a more traditional Gothic setting with its European castle. Both games combine these Gothic elements, and some light horror elements, with folklore from the country where the game takes place. Finally, both stories deal with heavier topics than the series had previously covered, marking a turning point in Her Interactive's storytelling. I almost think of these two games as an unofficial duology within the Nancy Drew series. Maybe a trilogy if we want to count the 28th game, Ghost of Thornton Hall, which also has a lot of these same story elements. Her Interactive took their first steps into darker, more mature storytelling with Shadow at the Water's Edge, and they were ready to continue that trend in their next game. They revisit so many of the same themes again in The Captive Curse, I think it's safe to say that someone in the writer's room had a lot to say about these topics. With these games being so similar, I've always found it interesting that The Captive Curse isn't as beloved as Shadow at the Water's Edge. Shadow at the Water's Edge is on virtually every fan's list of their top 5 games in the series, including mine, and it's a lot of people's number 1. On the other hand, I have literally never heard any player say that The Captive Curse is their favorite game in the series. I'm sure someone out there has that opinion, but it's definitely not a popular one. Most players seem to rank it somewhere in the middle of the pack. I do agree that Shadow at the Water's Edge is a better game, which is why I covered it first on this channel. For one thing, I think it has stronger characters. I also think that even though both games are puzzle heavy, Shadow at the Water's Edge does a better job at staying focused, so the puzzles don't feel like chores. And I think part of the fan reaction is just because Shadow at the Water's Edge did this type of story first and did it really well. The next game in the series was always going to be in the shadow of greatness, no matter how excellent it was. That being said, I think these games are really interesting in dialogue with each other. The Captive Curse really does feel like a continuation of the themes from Shadow at the Water's Edge, and I do think it adds something new and valuable to the conversation. It examines these themes from a different angle and even attempts to add nuance to the conversation by asking us to question our own assumptions about abuse and victimhood. In this video, I'll be exploring these aspects of the Captive Curse. I want to give a brief disclaimer. I do not speak German. I am trying my best with German pronunciations in this video, but as a native English speaker, some of these words are hard for me. Apologies to any German viewers if I accidentally butcher your native language. I would also like to give a couple of content warnings. The Captive Curse deals with many of the same sensitive topics as Shadow at the Water's Edge, so like in my video on that game, we'll be discussing themes of death, grief, abuse, and manipulation. As I referenced in the intro, this game deals explicitly with the mistreatment of women in particular. And finally, I want to acknowledge that while I was working on the script for this video, Snugly posted a great analysis of this game on their YouTube channel, so definitely check out that video after this one if you want to hear more about why this game is a hidden gem. The Captive Curse's story is deeply rooted in German folklore and especially in Märchen, aka German fairy tales. The game seems especially inspired by the works of the Brothers Grimm. It even features its own original Märchen about the monster of Castle Finster. Supposedly, the monster has lived in the forest outside the castle for hundreds of years. It preys on young women from the community, abducting them and carrying them off, never to be seen again. No one knows what the monster does with the women he abducts. Some say he kills them. Others say he is searching for a bride. Whatever his motives, the monster has been blamed for dozens of disappearances throughout the castle's history. At times, the game itself feels like a playable fairy tale, which I think may be part of what alienates some players. Fairy tales and folk tales seek to teach a moral lesson through the use of metaphor. One of my favorite examples of this is in stories of the Eastern German figure Mittagsfrau, also called Polonizia in Slavic regions and Lady Midday in English. Mittagsfrau appears as a beautiful woman dressed all in white and carrying shears or a scythe. She appears in fields of crops in the middle of hot summer days. If Mittagsfrau sees someone working in the field, she will stop them and pull them into a conversation. If they displease her or fail to answer her questions, she strikes them with illness or cuts off their head with her shears. On a literal level, this is a story about a vengeful nature spirit who goes around cutting off farm workers' heads. But on a metaphorical level, this is very clearly a warning about the dangers of heat stroke. A lot of fairy tales and folk tales work this way. They use a fantastical story to teach a very practical lesson. Another example that is more relevant to the Captive Curse is the story of Frau Holda. Frau Holda is a folkloric figure from Bavaria, the region of modern Germany where the game takes place. The Brothers Grimm wrote about Frau Holda in their fairy tale Old Mother Frost, which is actually referenced at several points in this game. In this story, two sisters find a magical realm at the bottom of a well where Frau Holda lives. The older sister is a hard worker and is willing to help Frau Holda with household chores, and Frau Holda rewards her with a shower of gold. The younger sister is lazy and idle, and she refuses to help with chores. Instead of rewarding her with gold, Frau Holda pours a kettle of pitch over her head. This is a pretty straightforward story about the importance of hard work and being a good guest. While the story is fantastical, the message is simple. Work hard with a good attitude, and good things will come to you. I share these examples to show that fairy tales are not always meant to be taken literally. To understand a fairy tale, we have to read between the lines and find the moral lesson or social commentary at the heart of the story. The Captive Curse works very much the same way. On a literal level, this game's story is about a monster that stalks a small, close-knit community and steals away young women. But on a deeper level, it's about how patterns of violence and abuse can cause harm to these women, and about how their neighbors turn a blind eye to what is really happening. The fact that this story centers on a monster also gives us insight into the writer's intentions. In every other haunting type game in the series, The creature doing the haunting is a ghost of some sort, or a similar type of vengeful spirit. For example, The Secret of Shadow Ranch has a haunting by a ghost horse, while Ghost Dogs of Moon Lake has, yep, you guessed it, ghost dogs. Not all of these spirits are technically ghosts. The Haunting of Castle Malloy has a banshee, and Shadow at the Water's Edge has a yurei, but I would argue that both of these spirits function like ghosts in their respective stories. But the Captive Curse tells us very explicitly, very early on in the game, that we are dealing with a monster. The word monster comes from the Latin monstrum, which means an omen or a warning. Originally, this word was used for mythological creatures that were created by a violation of morality. These monsters were often created by the gods to punish those who had done wrong. For example, the Minotaur is a monster created by Poseidon to punish King Minos for failing to make a promised sacrifice. The Minotaur exists as a reminder of Minos' wrongdoing and as a sign that the gods are displeased with him. Even in modern literature, monsters are used to represent social issues or societal fears. One of the most famous literary monsters is Frankenstein's monster from Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. The monster represents Victor Frankenstein's failures as a scientist and as a person. It represents the dangers of ambition without empathy. Some critics have argued that the monster is a metaphor for Mary Shelley's own relationships with her father, William Godwin, and her husband, Percy Bysshe Shelley, both of whom were abusive in different ways. It's interesting that the monster in The Captive Curse takes a lot of visual inspiration from Frankenstein's monster. I found some early concept sketches on Her Interactive's blog that look very similar to the monster in Shelley's book, who is described with yellowish skin and flowing black hair. In the finished game, though, Castle Finster's monster more closely resembles movie versions of Frankenstein's monster. In my Shadow at the Water's Edge video, I talked about how the appearance of the yurei hinted at some of the themes the game would cover. The same is true in The Captive Curse. The fact that this creature is called a monster tells us something about the role it plays in the story. The monster's appearance also hints at the game's themes, and even gives us some insight into the culprit's motives. As I've already mentioned, the mystery at the center of this game is who or what is causing the monster sightings at Castle Finster. Nancy is hired to investigate the monster by Marcus Bohm, the eccentric German millionaire who owns the castle. As Nancy investigates, she uncovers the castle's colorful past and learns more about the legend of the monster. Before long, it becomes clear that someone has chosen Nancy as the monster's next victim. This game follows the standard Nancy Drew formula by giving players 4 suspects to interact with. In the order I met them in my most recent playthrough, these characters are Karl Weschler, the Bürgermeister, or mayor of Castle Finster. Karl cares deeply about the safety of the castle's residents and disapproves of Marcus's plans to market the castle to tourists. He seems anxious and is hiding more than one dark secret from his past. Lukas Mittelmeier, the castle's youngest resident. Lukas is a smart kid with a vivid imagination and a fascination with the dark and the macabre. He's known for pranking the castle residents, especially Karl. His father is the head of security for Castle Finster, so Lukas knows everyone's secrets. He also knows the castle's hidden passageways better than anyone. Anya Mittelmeier, Lukas's aunt and the head of guest services at the castle. Anya is smart and capable and seems to be juggling a lot of responsibilities. She doesn't like Karl, and she ends up doing most of the work of actually running the castle while Karl works on his passion projects. We find out through gameplay that she used to date Marcus, but they're now separated. Renata Stoller, a traveling storyteller who always seems to be staying at the castle when the monster is active. Renata knows more about what's going on than anyone else, but she only speaks in cryptic hints. She tries several times throughout the game to get Nancy to leave the castle. You guys know the drill. If you haven't played this game or had it spoiled for you, comment which character you think is the culprit. I would love to hear your theories. One final spoiler warning. I am about to discuss the culprit and ending of the Captive Curse. I will also be showing images from the game's ending on screen. I will also be spoiling the ending and culprit of Shadow at the Water's Edge because I think it's really interesting to compare these two culprits and their motives. This is your final warning. So Anya is our culprit. Dressing up as the monster was just one part of a bigger plan to ruin Marcus's life. Throughout the events of the game, Anya has been planting false evidence that seems to show that Marcus ordered her to fake the monster sightings as a publicity stunt. Her end goal was to kill one of the castle's guests in a staged accident, then blame the death on Marcus. This ending and culprit motivation has striking similarities to Shadow at the Water's Edge. In that game, Rentaro was faking the hauntings in an effort to force his girlfriend to move away with him by ruining her family business. In my video on Shadow at the Water's Edge, we discussed how Rentaro was clearly an abusive boyfriend, and how the fake hauntings fit into a larger pattern of manipulation and control. Anya's situation is a little more complicated. At first glance, her motive seems almost like a stereotype of the crazy ex-girlfriend. She explicitly tells Nancy that she doesn't want Marcus back. She wants him ruined. When Nancy presses her about her motivations, Anya reveals that she stuck with Marcus at a time when he was much less wealthy and successful, and that she, quote, pushed him every day to go out there to make a mark on the world. But as soon as he started to find success in his career, Marcus left her for a, quote, stupid young blonde. This makes it sound like her motive was simple jealousy. But if we look deeper, we find more to the story. Anya and Marcus didn't break up recently. It's been years since they were together. Anya faked her resume to make sure she was hired in a position of authority at Castle Finster, ensuring that Marcus couldn't be rid of her and that she would be close enough to him to take revenge. Anya's behavior is obsessive and borders on stalking. According to the Stalking Prevention, Awareness, and Resource Center, stalking is a pattern of behavior directed at a specific person that would cause a reasonable person to fear for the person's safety or the safety of others, or suffer substantial emotional distress. They go on to say that stalkers use a variety of tactics, including but not limited to unwanted contact, including phone calls, texts, and contact via social media, unwanted gifts, showing up/approaching an individual or their family/friends, monitoring, surveillance, property damage, and threats. While Anya getting a job at Castle Finster may not count as stalking on its own, hacking Marcus's email account to plant incriminating messages, using her brother's job as head of security to spy on him and his employees, and attempting to sabotage his business definitely do count. Stalking is often connected to domestic violence, with data showing that 43% of female victims and 32% of male victims are stalked by a current or former romantic partner. This stalking behavior is much more likely to occur after the victim has ended the romantic relationship. To be honest, we don't know enough about Anya's and Marcus's relationship to say for certain whether it was abusive. We never see them together, and both of them are very reluctant to discuss their shared past. Marcus never even appears in the game in person, as we can only talk to him on the phone. However, I think Anya's lines during the culprit confrontation imply that their relationship was abusive, or at least very toxic. The language she uses to describe their relationship is all about control. She pushed him to go out there. She made him the man he is today. It sounds like Anya was exercising an unhealthy amount of control over Marcus when they were together, or at least trying to. As we discussed in my Shadow at the Water's Edge video, abuse is fundamentally about control. And in some cases, abusers can become violent when their control over their partner is threatened. It's interesting that Her Interactive chose to depict a female abuser and a male victim in this story. Usually, domestic violence and abuse are seen as women's issues. When these topics are shown in fiction, it's usually women being victimized by boyfriends or husbands. These stereotypes are so prevalent that we don't even have good data about male victims or about female abusers. Estimates on how many men experience domestic violence and abuse range from 1 in 10 to 1 in 3. We also don't have good data on how the psychology and methods of female abusers are different from male abusers. In what little data we do have available, one theme consistently shows up. The majority of women who abuse men have also been abused by their male partners. Many of these relationships are reciprocally abusive, meaning both partners abuse each other. Studies also show that women are more likely than men to use violence to retaliate for real or perceived wrongdoing by their partners or ex-partners. To be clear, I'm not trying to make abuses for female abusers at all. Abuse is abuse, and it is always wrong. But I do think this data has interesting implications for the story of the captive curse. Like I said, we don't know enough about Anya's and Marcus's relationship to say for sure who was abusing who. But let's be real. From the few conversations we have with Marcus, it's clear he's not exactly the most mature and sensitive guy on the planet. I like Marcus as a character, but it's not hard to imagine him being a pretty bad boyfriend. At the very least, I think Anya probably wasn't getting her emotional needs met in their relationship. At worst, it's possible there was some pretty nasty stuff going on behind closed doors. Or maybe Marcus was a great partner and is totally innocent in all of this. We don't know. The game doesn't tell us enough to make those conclusions, but it's clear that Anya feels that Marcus has wronged her, whether or not he actually has. This brings me back to what I said earlier about the significance of this game having a monster instead of a ghost. Anya sees herself as a sort of divine retribution for Marcus's wrongdoings. She is here to punish him for his sins, real or imagined. It's significant that she chose the legend of the monster of Castle Finster, a creature famous for preying on young girls. A Reddit post from a now deleted account summarizes the role of the monster legend in the story really well. That post says, "A lot of people are frustrated by the captive curse's ambiguousness with respect to the ending. But what happened to the girls is a question that frequently gets asked whenever the game comes up. Personally, I think the game is pretty explicit in suggesting that the monster has been used throughout Castle Finster's history to justify human evils that people didn't want to admit their community were capable of. For many, it was easier/less disturbing to believe that there was a monster prowling the woods than to believe one of their friends/neighbors was a thief and/or murderer. Whether Marcus abused Anya or not, she is intentionally tying his reputation into a legacy of violence against women in this community. She wants people to believe that Marcus is a monster who hurts women, whether that's true or not. This is where I think the game's ending breaks down a little bit. Part of what made Shadow at the Water's Edge so successful was how well Rentaro's abuse of Miwako was foreshadowed with hints throughout the story, and how well that storyline was woven into the themes of violence and abuse in Japanese yurei folklore. In The Captive Curse, the ambiguous relationship between Anya and Marcus muddies the waters. I think Her Interactive should have doubled down on the themes they established in the monster legend by confirming that Anya was taking revenge on Marcus for some kind of abuse or wrongdoing. Or they should have committed to subverting those themes by making it clear that Anya was always the violent one in the relationship. Instead, we have a villain who sees herself both as victim and monster, which could have been interesting if it was handled better. For example, the game could have taken inspiration from fairy tales like Old Mother Frost by showing how wickedness always leads to suffering. The writers could have drawn attention to Nancy and Anya as foils for each other by connecting them to the two sisters in the fairy tale. Nancy fights with her boyfriend Ned in this game, but they work through it. Nancy is willing to put in the work to overcome these challenges and improve the relationship, and she's rewarded just like the good sister in the fairy tale. Anya takes the opposite approach, and she's punished like the wicked sister. That could have been a satisfying ending that tied up all the game's themes in a neat way. A lot of fans believe that The Captive Curse was originally meant to be a much darker game that dealt more explicitly with mature themes, but that Her Interactive ended up changing it to be less disturbing at some point during production. I haven't been able to find any evidence to support this, but I see why people think it. This game does feel like it wants to deal with dark, heavy subjects, but keeps pulling its punches. And ultimately, I think that's the reason it wasn't as successful as Shadow at the Water's Edge. I could keep talking about this game. We haven't even touched on how its visuals are inspired by German expressionist film, or the tabletop role-playing subplot, or how Renata's backstory ties into World War II. But I think I'll leave it here for today. If you enjoyed the video, please like, comment, and subscribe to give me a dopamine boost. Please let me know what Nancy Drew games you'd like to see me cover in the future. As always, all of my sources are linked in the description below. Until next time, stay safe and take care of yourself.